Tom Petty, what a pleasure. Thank you for doing
Thank
this.
you. Pleasure to be here.
We're in Woodshed Recording here in Malibu, not too far from your home and your studio. And we're sitting in the studio surrounded by instruments. And I think about you, and I think, when you're in a place like this, do you think work or play?
I probably think more play than work. I have a studio similar, I mean, it's a bit bigger than this, but they're preparing that for a photo shoot after I finish this. so we're here, and it's nice people of Point Doom. But yeah, I love the studio. I am in there most every day.
Feels like a
one thing.
playland still.
Absolutely, yeah.
You guys are so consistent, you and the Heartbreakers, in terms of wanting to record in that live off the floor style. This feels like a kind of that sort of rustic type of studio you do that in. How do you feel about how dramatically recording has changed in terms of embracing new technology? Do you lament the digitization of everything?
In a way I do. Recording hasn't changed as much. It's the way you go about it. I mean, if you're going to make the kind of music we make, you really need to play with musicians and actually play your instruments and everything. And you need to. We like interplay between the musicians, so we always do our basic tracks with at least 5 of us playing. And then, we'll take it and fool with it beyond that. What I don't like is, with the digitization, is that people aren't hearing quality sound. The consumer is not getting what I hear every day, which is just miles above, say, an MP3. Or what most people are hearing, their music off their phone or their computer. That's really it's 5% of the sound. So I get really annoyed with that. Most people don't. They don't really care. But I think if there's anything coming in the future that might revive the music business, is making people aware of just how good music can sound, And
You still love vinyl, right?
Yeah, I love vinyl, and I love the highest reproduction of digital. If like, say, Neil Young's Pono thing, if you hear that next to an MP3, it's laughable. You just slap your knees laughing at how bad the MP3 sounds and how much can actually be heard, But I don't know, as far as the tape versus digital thing, I think that's all about what you like and how you want to use it, I kind of use both. I like the sound of the tape distortion. I like that little bit of distortion, that little bit of whack that the signal gets when it goes to the tape. But I also like the convenience of the digital, where editing is really quick. Things that would have taken us days to do years ago on tape are really quite quick now. So you can. I think it's a happy balance between the two is what I like. But
it's interesting still going for that vibe of having all the musicians in one room playing off each other.
Yeah.
I mean, after all these years.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Well, most people don't, though.
That's because they can't play. People that can play do.
You think so? You think it's about people not being proficient enough on their...
Yes, I think it's exactly that.
Doing multiple takes and patching them together. And
it's exactly that. Yeah.
And do you guys keep playing? Is it like the Beatles? I mean, do you keep playing until you get the best take?
Yeah.
So you do 100 takes if you have to?
Well, hopefully we won't have to, but we would if it took that long. It depends on how much you believe in the song. If you've got this, you know, we try not to work on anything we don't really believe in, and that's going to become apparent within a few takes, whether the song is good or not. Fortunately, as we've gotten older, we've gotten better at, you know, just the craft of recording. Making a record isn't nearly that. It's not hard. You know I can do that. It's coming up with a song that is still the great challenge. Because without it, without the actual song, doesn't matter what you do in the recording studio, it's not going to work.
Let me ask you about all that, because with Hypnotic Eye, I mean, you've said a couple times in the past that when you're in a good headspace, you create your best work. Listening to this record, this sounds like some of your best work ever. So am I to assume you've been in a good headspace in the last few years?
Yes, I think I have. Well, I'm looking back on it. Yeah, I think things have been really good and very creative. You know, I still have my days like anyone else, but nothing depressing going on.
It's sort of the opposite of what some artists who draw their greatest inspiration from feeling like crap, right? From heartbreak or something horrible happening. That's not the case for you.
Well, something horrible might happen, but you don't really write a song when you're feeling horrible. It's the last thing you want to do. I mean, if I feel horrible, the last thing I'm going to do is look for a guitar to write a song. Or
it's not catharsis?
Maybe later it's cathartic when you're happy again. Maybe you can remember that and draw on it. But is it, you know, does it solve any problems? I don't think so. But I think, you know, you can moan on about your problems with songs, yeah. But I'm not one to write when I'm bummed out. I sort of go into a coma. I don't really go for the music then.
You guys really wanted to make a rock record with Hypnotic Eye. Why?
The material started to dictate the direction. I think we made the record in stages between tours. In the past, I've done records and I'll be nearing the end and there's a tour that's been booked and everyone is really nervous about me finishing and turning it in, and sometimes I've felt that I had to rush something, or this time I insisted that I'm not going to turn this in until I'm done with it. And so I would just tour anyway and then come back and work. So I think 3 or 4 tours went through the record while I was working on it. But as far as being a rock and roll record, you know, the first things we cut were, I think we cut some blues. We cut 3 or 4 blues that came out very well. I didn't feel that that was the road to go down. I felt like we'd been down that road, and though they came out really well, the next batch of songs tended to be different. And when we recorded those, suddenly we're in rock and roll world, and it's going really well. And I think that kind of dictated, this is all very subliminal. I mean, do I sit down and think about, you know, what direction I'm going in?
You don't?
Not really. I'm going with what's working.
There's not a conversation that happens with Mike and Ben.
With the Heartbreakers?
Yeah.
I don't think we've had a conversation in decades. But I about music anyway.
Really?
I mean,
like you don't go, hey guys, this next record, let's make a real rock record.
No, nobody's gonna have that talk. But
Why not?
we don't need to.
Right.
There's no need to.
Just there.
We're going to play, and if it's good playing, then you'll get some response from them. And if it's a good groove, I really wanted a groove more than anything. You know, I just wanted the bass and drums to really groove. I wanted the groove to be good on everything, and that's missing from a lot of people that still try to do the rock and roll, I think, is the rhythm section is so important, you know. It must create almost a trance, you know, between the bass drums and the rhythm instruments. And that's easy to say and hard to do. It's not so easy. But I guess our opinion of this is, if we're going to do this as old men, then we should probably bring some level of sophistication to the table. Like, we've gotten better at this, and there's actually a reason for us to do it.
Are you old men?
Well, we ain't young, you know. I ain't ready to call it a day, but, you know, I ain't 20 either, you know.
But it's a very invigorating, like, it's an energized record, and and it feels like there's this amazing through line where your guys are almost channeling Mudcrutch. You're almost channeling. I mean, the original. You know, it sounds like the first two Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers records to a certain extent as well. Does that make sense to you? Do you hear it that way?
You know, Mike Campbell told me that on the first, like, real playback we had, where we played everything in a row. And he said, you know, I get the feeling from the vocals that this is very much like the first few records we made. I had never thought about that, you know, until he said that. And then I started to see what he meant. And there was, I guess, it's kind of the snarl had come back into the music. I didn't plan on it. It was just, you know, if you're going to do a song, you write the song and try to create a character, usually. And when you're going to sing the song, there's a bit of acting involved, where you've got to become that character. And you've got to really believe, just like an actor, really, you got to really believe that you're that person. And the material will dictate the way you sing it. You know, it does to me. And so I think it was really the songs where that seemed what was called for at the time, was to use that voice.
It took you a while to write this record. I mean, you said,
Yes.
you know, you said, it took me quite a few years to write 11 songs that I felt were coming through and saying what should be said.
Yeah.
What is what should be said, and why did it take so long?
It's really hard to write 11 good songs that will go together and maintain the same bar you've set with the first one, you know? We still try to make albums in this day and age. It's not really an appreciated art form, but it's what we do, you know. And so it has to have a beginning and a middle and an end. It's a long player. So many of them you hear that where they might start out okay and then start to, you know, dip a little bit, and then it dips a little bit more, and then you're no longer interested. And this is because the songs have lost quality.
Some killer, some filler.
Yes, and you know, we're all guilty of that. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do, and I really didn't want to do it. I wanted to make sure that didn't happen. So I might do a song and say, no, this isn't working. It's not what I want. Over to the locker, you know, we're going back to something else. So, you know, it takes longer. I mean, you may get lucky and have some sort of spurt where you get a lot of songs, but to get 11 takes me these days, with all the distractions in life. It seems as you get older, there's more and more distractions, but it took me that long to do it, and I would think it will probably take me a long time to do it again. It's not a simple job.
How do you know when a song is good enough that you want to take it to the boys? When you said that there were some you wrote and you put them on the shelf? What's the process there?
Well, if I can sing it on my guitar or on the piano and it sounds, I'm not embarrassed to sing it to them, I'll take it down there,
There's really
I
stuff you'd be embarrassed to play those guys after all these years?
probably, yeah. There's stuff I'd be embarrassed to play anyone. But when I hit something good, I kind of feel like, okay, this is coming off. I make a little recording of it myself, just playing with the guitar, and I listen to it back and go, okay, well, this would work on that level. It's probably going to sound better with a band, so I take it in. If it won't work on that level, I've found that there's really no reason to bring it in, because...
And do those guys always accept? I mean, what happens if there's something that you think is worthy of bringing it in, and one of those guys goes, "Yeah, it's good."
Oh, he'd be fired.
Really?
No, just a joke.
Right.
But we don't really have that happen very much because...
So he would be fired.
I'm rarely that wrong. No. I might be fired, but I wait for them to tell me it's a good song, which you won't get right away. You might get midway through the session, someone, will, as they're passing, will go, "Good song," and that means that's high praise.
That's the level. No one gushes at this point.
No
It's
one
just
in the Heartbreakers gushes, no. But but if you get good song, or I like this, or something like that, then yes, they do it. They're really just trying to they're trying to find what adds to the record, and we have this process of they come in and play it to them on the guitar, and they'll kind of be in a circle and watch, and I don't think they're really judging it yet. They're just trying to learn it. And once they've learned all the changes, we'll have a run through. Then if we made it all the way to the end, we'll go into the control room and listen right away. And there'll be a discussion like, okay, well, that's good, but that's not. Binma, that's a good bit there, but don't do this here. The bass line is great, but it should change here. What are we going to do for an ending? It needs an ending. Well, how about da-da-da-da-da? Is the tempo good? No, I think it could be faster. Okay, all those changes in our head, and we go out, we play it a couple more times, we come right back, and it just goes on and on all day like that.
no rehearsal beforehand. You're right in the
No,
studio.
we've-
You still
we've-
don't rehearse before you.
We've never rehearsed for a record. We've always created it on the floor. I mean, we come in with this, I like to have the song done when I come in.
But that sounds risky. It sounds like, what if
Well,
there's
it
different
probably
visions
is.
in the studio, and and all of a sudden you're burning time in there, and it's amazing that you guys have never rehearsed before you go and record a record.
We were put in that situation early on at Shelter Records by Jenny Cordell, who was, and God bless him, he's passed on now, but he just put us in the studio. Like Shelter owned its studios, so he just put us in there and leave us, and then check in on us. But he'd say, you need to learn that making a record and performing live are not necessarily related that much. The record is a performance, but there's no one there. You're creating just like you would an oil painting. You're adding color. You do your sketch, and there's a lot that goes on. So bit by bit, you learn how to make these noises that are attractive or interesting, and that's tremendous fun. It still fascinates me that someone would be interested in a sample of something when you could take a microphone and make your own that may be much better, or it's going to be far more interesting. So, but of course you would have to play it,
Right.
There's a lot of people that are in so much of a hurry to be I guess, to be famous, or that they don't want to take the time to learn to
The craft.
play and do all that.
How when you
They'd rather just knock it down off a computer and maybe get on a game show and get famous, you know. But there's, you know, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. We're more old school than that. We like creating the sounds. Sorry to
That's
interrupt
okay.
you.
Do you feel like it's easier to get famous now in what you described, the way you put it in kind of a cynical way, than
Cynical?
maybe, Tom?
I didn't mean to be cynical.
I mean, the process is cynical as opposed to learning the craft, sort of, you know, the samples and all of that, and throwing that out there and using. Do you feel like that's something that wouldn't have existed years ago, even with corporate rock or sort of manufactured stuff?
Nothing was any worse than corporate rock. I mean, nothing any worse has come along. Though there is a lot of popular kind of plastic computer music that's not that interesting. I don't feel like somebody, like the artist did that. You know, you put your name on it, but you didn't do that, you know. But nevertheless, you know, that's how a record's made isn't important to the audience. What's important to them is what they're hearing, you know. So that's really beside the point. But as far as getting famous, I don't know nothing about getting famous. You know, I know that.
Well, you're famous.
Am I?
Aren't you?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people get famous now very quickly, and then they seem to have a turnover where they're not famous for that long, but someone else steps in to fill the slot. They're sort of disposably famous, I suppose. But I can't keep up with who's famous anymore. I mean, I'm introduced to people all the time that someone will elbow me in the ribs and say, hey, they're famous. I have no idea. But I know in my time, in my generation, if they'd have tried to offer my generation music by someone that had won a game show, it would have been hysterical. You would have been laughed out of the room. But, you know,
Is
maybe,
a game show like American Idol?
well,
What do you
like
mean by
any,
game show?
I don't know, I've never seen them, but like any
a
of
singing
them.
show?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or a talent show
Yeah.
or something. That wouldn't have, I mean, we were suspicious of people that had hit records. I mean, it was that different a time.
I want to go 2 steps back to you playing this stuff for the guys when you're in the studio. Just on a sidebar, like personally, I mean, you've known Mike Campbell and Beaumont Tench and these guys since you were kids, teenagers in Gainesville. And what does it mean for you? How much does it mean to you to have one of those guys say, that's a really good song at
A
this
lot.
point?
It's the highest compliment because they know me so well. I mean, we know each other so well that for them to say that means a lot. Though honestly, when we're working, I think a lot of the time they're so caught up, everyone's mind goes to how to create the record. How do we get the most out of this? And it may take them a while to get around to remembering, you know, to say something to me about it. We were doing one track on this record that I quite liked. It was American Dream Plan B. And we had played that 4 or 5 times, and no one was saying anything to me, you know, and it was just taken, and it would end, and it was silent. And I said, you know, I think we've got something, you know, going on here if you want to commit to it and do it. And they were all like, oh, we love this. Great, yeah, we're down. And I said, well, why is it so quiet? You know, well, we're just trying to see what's next. But it's a funny bunch of people. But
I love the idea that even you can get neurotic about whether the Heartbreakers, your guys for all these years, still like one of your songs when you're recording
Well,
it?
they've never treated me any, one of the great things about them is I've never achieved any more status in the band than I had long before I was Tom Petty, or I've never been treated any different. And and that's a good, safe place to be where you're not going to be treated that way. But they're such a terrific band, and I feel really blessed and lucky to be able to, to still play with them, and that they still feel that way, because I mean they could play with anyone they wanted to, but they're still together, and it's great.
Well, they probably recognize the immense talents that you bring to the table too. Many of your peers, including your friend Bob Dylan, have called you a masterful poet. Where does a lyric typically start for you?
It just comes out of the air. It's kind of a dangerous business looking really deeply into what, the germ that creates songs. I mean, I don't like to stare at that light very long, I get a little superstitious about it, but...
Like you'll lose your mojo
Well,
or something?
there's some kind of actual magic going on there, and I feel like for some reason I was born with some kind of conduit to this, this energy force or whatever it is, and I can have that happen through me if I really try to do it, or sometimes when I'm not, when I'm just standing somewhere, or at the funniest times, something can come into your head and you think, that's a good line, that's a good couple of lines. And then it's just trial and error. Like, it can be really frustrating if, say, you have a great chorus, but you don't know what should come in front of that chorus. Can really drive you
Like
insane.
The Waiting?
The Waiting is a very good example of that. That can be frustrating.
You wrote the chorus and spent weeks trying to figure out the rest of it, right?
I did, yeah. The chorus came very quickly. Sometimes the song can come so fast that you're suspicious of where it came from. And sometimes you just got to slug it out. Sometimes lately I'm like working on the lyrics till the record's done. I mean, we may have cut the record, and as we're overdubbing or if we're listening to it, I'll hear a line that I think that line's not good. I'm not good.
But in the poetry, there also seems to be, I mean, a lot of your songs, a message that you're sending directly to people. I mean, one of the songs that I mentioned before the interview that I absolutely love on this new record, All You Can Carry. In the chorus, this is from Hypnotic Eye, you sing, take what you can, all you can carry, take what you can and leave the past behind. Now, I immediately think Tom Petty's saying, no matter, I'm not going to rest on my laurels, nor am I going to look at things that I have regrets about in the past. I'm only looking forward, I'm not looking at my past. Was that part of where that lyric was coming from, or was it completely just a fictional idea that you were writing about?
Well, it could be. I don't really know. I'm just writing it. It all makes sense to me, and it's something telling me to write it. You take what you can. I mean, it's part of just living through this life. Is just take all you can carry, and sometimes to just carry the weight of what the cards life has dealt you. You're going to have to drop some of the past and move ahead.
What does that mean to you? What's some of the past that you would drop?
Oh God, we'd be here all day. I mean,
give me one example.
Well, there's just so many. There's so many painful things that we all go through in life, and they become a load that you carry around, and until you learn to kind of just, I think it's about forgiveness, maybe, like that being a really important word, and part of learning how to be a good person and how to be happy, as that when you forgive those things, you can drop that load and move forward. So maybe there's something even that deep in the song, but there's a number of things informing that song. So I don't know. It's funny because you're like you were saying, like Bob might say that I'm a good poet, and I would say that about him. But there's a difference between poetry and songwriting, because you have to sing it, and that's even harder.
Why?
Well, because if it doesn't sound good, it won't work.
Right. Not all poets should.
I can
not all
have the
poetry can be
words,
sung.
but if I'm singing those words and it doesn't sound good, it's not going to work. So I've also got to deal with what's going to sound good. So I deal with that less and less, to be honest.
But you don't like, you seem to not like it when people get too literal about your lyrics, right? I mean, you famously said that your hit song "Won't Back Down" was almost too literal for your liking.
Very naked.
Yeah.
A very naked song. Still
What's
makes
wrong with
me
that?
uncomfortable. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I like being read that easily. But sometimes that happens, I immediately felt second thoughts about that song, because there was just nothing to hide behind in it. There's no metaphor, there's nothing in it but just very straightforward stuff. But that's the way it came out, and there was something about it that sounded truthful to me. If you can get something in the studio that sounds kind of a little timeless, and it sounds honest, and you believe the singer, then you're doing something. You're doing something.
Do you know when? I mean, you've been so prolific, and there's been so many hit songs throughout your career. There was that period, late 80s, early 90s, Full Moon Fever, followed by the amazing Heartbreakers record, Into the Great Wide Open, where there's a number of hit songs on that. And I wonder if you, in the moment of creation, if you will, know if something's, when you're writing Free Fallin', do you know in your bones, you kind of go, man, this is a big song?
Well, I didn't know exactly. There's been very few times where I set out to write a single. I knew that I really liked those songs, like Free Fallin'. I knew that was a good one because I played it all night when I went home. I just kept, I rarely play myself, and I went home and I just kept playing that track over.
The recording
and
of
over.
it?
Yeah. The rough mix, I'd take it home from the studio, and I thought, man, this is good, but I still didn't know that it was a hit song till much later when it actually was, but I knew I liked it. When somewhere in that period, between the end of the 80s and the 90s, while we were recording the album Wildflowers, we had changed labels to Warner Brothers from Universal, and the old label was going to release a greatest hits album, which I wasn't really keen on, but it was a contractual obligation. And part of this obligation was that I had to deliver a new song to go along with this album. And it irked me no end that I had to do this, because I was trying to write for Wildflowers. I didn't want to turn around and give something away. And I kind of hate it when you get those greatest hits albums and there's all hits, and then what's that, at the end. There's like, well, what's that on there for? I hate that.
Well, why do you
Why
hate
is
that
there
so?
a live track all of a sudden? Like, I don't get it. But
The bonus that they're giving, they're offering.
there is no bonus track. It's the end of your record, man. There is no bonus. I don't buy that. I don't want it on my record unless it's supposed to be there. But this is why people find me difficult sometimes. But it makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
But
It does actually make sense, yeah.
yeah. So me and Rick Rubin sit down to talk about this, and he said, I heard you playing a thing with the Heartbreakers, one day when they were over at Mike's, and you should finish that, and we'll get them together and go in and cut it, and that'll be that. And that song turned out to be Mary Jane's Last Dance. Long discussion about whether that was a single or not. We really didn't know. And, there was a lot of scratching our heads and wondering about, well, maybe we should do another one, and in the end of the day, it was, one of our biggest songs. Mm. But it wouldn't have been done if we hadn't absolutely had to make a record to fill out this album.
But you never write towards anything. In other words, you don't write prescriptively, right? It wasn't like, I have to write a hit song for this. You just write what you write, from what I understand.
I think it's all I can do. I'm not really somebody that could take, be told, like, go do this and do it. That's too much pressure. I'm not sure I could deliver on that.